Welcome everyone to welcome back to our quest to build a culture of empathy. We are on the last session of this cohort, so I'm sure you're all very excited. We are going to remind you that this is being recorded for educational and promotional purposes. And so yeah, let's start with check-ins. So let's, like what we did last week, let's take a moment and just reflect before we start our check-ins. What's like your one thing from this past week that just feels really alive right now that you want to share? So it could be like questions or comments from last session, or something from your empathy or a buddy call or a circle you ran this week, something like that. But let's just take a quick second and get that one thing that we want to share in our check-ins loaded up. All right, let's do it. Wayne.
Right. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my daughter's in Christchurch at the moment, actually, and in my daughter's hostel sort of room. She's an RA here, and I'm just trying to use her Apple computer. So I've great success this morning. I've got it going. So center of mind for me. Just the busyness of what's been going on, and the with respect to using the empathy circles, and it's almost as though when you use an empathy circle, it's time for it's a slow down time for me as a person as well. I have a lot of contracts that I do all around the place, and when I conduct an empathy circle or try an empathy circle, it's like a therapy session in itself, personally. So yeah, that's center of mind for me.
Thank you, Wayne. Gloria, what's on your mind right now? Your one thing?
I think I saw the importance of how I need the person to listen, but I need them to also talk, because when they're only like reflecting back on what I'm saying, I'm not sure if I'm the only one who's feeling that way or whatnot. But when I was talking with my empathy buddy yesterday, it was really comforting to hear a similar experience from her too, and to like see the agreement of how I'm feeling during the final season and whatnot. So yeah.
Thank you. Shyla.
So I second what Wayne said, because after all these weeks, I'm finally realizing the importance of slowing down and breathing. In fact, both my buddy and in the circle that I participated in with Cat Spence in Scotland, that subject came up, and I thought it was a sign from the universe for me to finally learn how to slow down for both my physical and mental health. I mean, I'm okay now, but it's the future. We need to just not be so intense and be galloping like horses. It's just good to just slow down and let things be. So that was a big takeaway for me.
Thank you. Savannah, what was your big thing this week?
My big thing this week, I guess, I talked to someone about like what I was doing with like on Saturdays. And so I kind of like introduced the topic of empathy circles, and they thought the idea was kind of cool. So I hope to create my own and facilitate my own sometime in the future with that person.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Elizabeth.
So I had a job interview this week, and one of the questions they asked was, like, how do I incorporate diversity and inclusion in my life? And so I talked about a few things, but I also ended up telling them about the Empathy Circle training, because empathy is such a big part of like inclusion and seeking justice for everybody. So I didn't even know I was going to talk about that, but then I made the connection. And so that was like, it was cool to make the connection about how empathy circles are helping me in other ways as well.
Awesome. B.
Hi. I had a similar note, I guess, to what Gloria said. I love the empathy circles. I love the empathetic communication, but it always feels a little bit difficult for me. Like it feels sort of one-sided because the person who is listening, they are reflecting, they are obviously engaged, but they're just reflecting back what I said, or I'm just reflecting back what they said. And there's definitely that feeling of understanding because like as they reflect, it shows whether or not they understood. But for me, there doesn't feel like there's a deeper connection there because it doesn't feel like there's that, oh yeah, I relate to this, or, you know, these are my feelings on your feelings or anything like that. So like, it's not a problematic thing at all. It's just a spot of difficulty for me, I guess.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'm thinking maybe we could address that. Maybe Bill will be talking about quick questions and comments. So maybe we'll have something to say about that when that comes around. So thanks for sharing that. Joni.
Yeah, I guess kind of along those same lines, I feel like, well, what I kind of realized is that I don't place a lot of value on what I have to say. And I think that's why I sometimes have trouble speaking, especially if someone who spoke before me spoke about stuff that isn't as, it doesn't make as much of a connection with me. I realize that I think I just am often not asked in my life to give my opinions on random stuff, or just like people ask me what I want to say. So I think I've just not learned to place not a lot of value and like respect people's time and not tell them something that's useless for them to hear. So that was kind of interesting to realize.
Thanks. Dominic.
Hey everyone. I've been thinking a lot about what Edwin and Bill talked about last week in my group about like difficult conversations and kind of conflict resolution, to kind of think about empathy first and not be defensive. So I've been thinking about that all week. And then to relate to Elizabeth, I actually had a job interview and I also mentioned empathy circles, and yeah, hopefully it went well.
All right. Monica.
I've been thinking about how when I'm unable to have an empathy circle with someone, how I can listen to someone from a place of empathy. This week, I listened to a family member going through a difficult situation, and I was able to offer my support while respecting their boundaries.
Thank you. Let's try and do some quick facilitator check-ins since we have some time. Timothy, what's on your mind right now?
Cool. Well, what's on my mind is, you know, what B and Joni and Gloria mentioned about something deeper than understanding and wanting to be heard, that deeper resonance. So that's on my mind right now. We can talk about that later, but just really appreciated that. You know, wanting that kind of resonance from people. But for me, I have a little empathy circle with my neighbors, and nobody showed up on Thursday night. Nobody showed up. I felt sad and a little bit lonely. And it's really got me thinking about relationship. I have a little community of a few little houses nearby. And it's like, okay, I set the space, but sometimes people are full, right? They don't want to come, but I've set topics sometimes. And maybe the better the topic, the more people are interested in coming. But then it's also just part of the relationship that I have one-on-one with each of my neighbors, you know? So thinking about that, you know, like, hey, where do you have the space where people are really listening? And just going to hang out, have an empathy circle out on the street, you know, for 5 minutes, you know, and just kind of build that into my life a little more. So I'm thinking of things that surround the empathy circle that help it succeed, you know, and also all about relationship is what I'm thinking. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Edwin.
Yeah, see, for me, it's a lot about what's coming up is a lot about the design of the training. So all the different comments about the listening and how you listen and the sense of satisfaction within the listening. I'm just thinking about all those. It's a 5-week training, which is not a lot of time really to go into depth. And so I see there's so I have a lot of ideas for, additions, like, a catalog of challenges. Like I hear these different challenges come up, a catalog where we address those. We had sort of shifted from, and I'll talk more about this later. One cohort starts right after the other and just learned, oh, we need a little bit more space between the cohorts, and I'll talk about that. So I'm thinking a lot about the design and really appreciate everybody's comments, because we really want to kind of speak to those. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks. Susan, you unmuted. Go for it.
Hey, you know, I'm a trainee this time for facilitator, and I just think it's an important role to be learning and taking a step forward. I invite the rest of you to consider that. I'm also just looking at each of your faces and realizing I know some of you much better than others. I'd like to acknowledge that you came in as pandemic professors and have already reached out to support others. And I'm really thrilled to get to know you. This is our last session. This is an important thing that's happening on our planet, culture of empathy. I can't think of anything I'd rather give my time to in these next several years. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Susan. And Bill.
I'm just, I guess my learning is just sort of like creating the space for people to learn. It relates to the design and other things, but to basically, have it broad enough to, accept diversity of people, and at the same time be focused enough so that they actually get something out of it. And anyway, so it's an interesting, what was it, creative tension, which is not a bad thing for me. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Bill. So yeah, I wanted to mention also that Lou has some personal issues come up today, so that's why he's not with us. He did just check in with us facilitators, and he asked us to tell you that he loves each and every one of you, and he's inspired by his experience with you, and he really just had some personal things, so he couldn't be here. But I just want to assure you all that he would be here if he could, and I'm sure he is hopeful he'll see you again in future cohorts. So just to pass that message on to you. And my little check-in, I guess, will be, so I don't know what, something made this come up for me and someone else's check-in, but I found this like free trial of the Wim Hof method, like videos about the Wim Hof method. So I've been doing like super cold showers and deep breathing, and it's pretty fun stuff. So that's like, just throwing that out there. I've been enjoying it. And if anyone wants to check out the Wim Hof method, it's pretty fun. So thanks for hearing me on that. And I think we're moving over to Bill now. Yeah, with some feedback.
Yeah. I won't be able to address everything. Please feel free to, if something's not addressed, to contact us. And that really comes to one of the questions is about wanting to have more contact with the trainers, and our emails are there. And so I just, please contact us if you have a question, or you want to just have a little empathy buddy call or something like that. That's kind of part of the deal. People were talking about the next cohort. I know that Edwin will talk about that later. And so there'll be a little bit of space between the cohorts. One person talked about wanting to see how we handle the challenges. Well, maybe that was a bit of a, and that's fine. We have done that. Specifically when we've had like extra time or something like that, we want to give you the practice first in real time, because we feel that that's valuable learning. But if you in your breakout group, if you'd say, hey, how do you handle this, or could you do this, or role model the how to, that's fine to ask for that. So the other thing was, some people talked about, different languages. Again, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that if you come here and English is not your first language, it is not a chore for us to accommodate you. We welcome and honor your bravery and courage in coming here. And also that this method is easily adapted for other languages. And indeed, people are doing that. So once you get the basics, they're pretty simple. You can do it in your own language. And then that does offer for people who are native speakers a much richer experience. And I certainly would, second that. People want more of this or more of that. I won't get into all the specifics. But there are other training modules, like Edwin is talking about other modules that you can do. So you take this as the basic module, and those have not been designed as of yet. But that is some place to put some of your creative juices. Like I'm doing one and trying to address educators and trying to get it into schools. That's one example. People ask for a training module and easier search. That's beyond my pay grade. It's a lot to do. So, Edwin, I think, does a very, very thorough job. And so, use that. But certainly, if you're missing something, again, contact us and we'll be happy to help you. And I'm sure Edwin will help you find what you're looking for. And real-time practice. People said, like a real empathy circle, come to the Friday cafes or these introductory cafes. And that you really do get. We just did one yesterday and I had a few challenges, not too difficult, but a few challenges in real time. And so that's a good place to kind of get yourself up to speed. And deeper connection. It was interesting because somebody was talking about that you're reflecting, but we're not making a deeper connection. And in different people, different times, it takes a while. I mean, I would go back to what Edwin says, is that this is a basic practice that can be built on for other things. I think my personal opinion is this is an excellent tool, but that is, how do you use a tool? That's up to you. And so sometimes it takes a bit longer. Some people make a connection more quickly. Some people, take a little bit more time to get into there. Sometimes you need a longer circle. Sometimes one of the things that we say is that it takes sometimes, 3 or 4 rounds before people kind of get through the superficial things and then start to get into a real heartfelt center. But, there are no rules about that. But we certainly want deeper connection. I think the world would be a better place. That's what a culture of empathy would encourage. And so there might be other modules, other things, more connection, talking with people, partnering up, all of these things we encourage. And, not everything can be encompassed in one empathy circle. So I think I'm within my 5-minute time limit here. I know I've gone through quite a bit. I'll first just ask very quickly, is there something that glaring that I missed that somebody still has a question about? Okay, and then I'll invite, time's up. and then I'll invite the other trainers to make any comments if they wish.
I'll make a quick comment. So in terms of the training is not sort of geared towards deep connection, because you do an empathy circle and then you have challenges and you're kind of breaking up the connection. In some of the circles, it's these really great topics that are proposed. We start going into it and then you get these challenges coming in. So this is not sort of the space for sort of deeper connections at that level. But we're going to be doing empathy circles at this time slot for the next 3 weeks here. So you can come back and there's no challenges. It's going to be more about just the practice. So I'll just wanted to mention that. Yeah.
Okay, Timothy.
Yeah, I just wanted to honor that call towards deeper connection, more than the words. When you were speaking, I wrote down something more than understanding. And in my training, that call is for resonance, where somebody leans in, there's a little extra capacity or silence on their part, interest, right? And then they're like right there with you, and they're like, is this it? So it's like a little more of a leaning in, right? I just hear that call, and I just want to champion that. Joni, I heard you say, like, when, what's useful and supportive for somebody else to hear. Instead of having to worry about that, like somebody really wants to hear, right? Being welcomed, where someone's calling you forth. So I just want to honor that call within you, and it's in me, and I believe it's in all of us to be welcomed and interested in and drawn out. So I affirm that. So now my comment for this, I agree. When you have an empathy circle, and it's a great foundation because you're setting up the conditions for that. So you start getting closer to people actually being there, quiet, an agreed space, and it's like it gets closer, and I start hoping for it even more, and then we have the time limits. So this structure is like it sets up most of the conditions for that to happen. But here's what I want to say. Even within this structure, and let's say you got 5 minutes for your turn, and somebody's kind of saying back their understanding, but it's not quite satisfying. My question for you and for me and all of us is, how do I say, no, that's not quite right. Here's what I want you to hear. In other words, no, that's almost there, but so how do we each, when somebody's trying to listen, how do we stand up for our need for being understood? How do we say that? Right? So I just want us to be stronger on that part of it. When we're the speaker in the circle and there's a listener and they're almost there, that we just almost, we stand, we have 1 minute left. This is it. Can you say this back to me, please? So as a facilitator of an empathy circle, I also want to encourage speakers to do that. Like we want to be met, but sometimes we need that assertive, no, not quite. Here's what I'm trying to say. So it's kind of like that piece too. I want us all to have that strength to say, no, not quite. In my world, it's dogging for your needs, like hanging in there, until someone gets it. And also, it's hard to dog for our needs in a world that is not interested. And so we humans need others to invite us out. We do. So where can we find that? So I'm just really touched by that theme that came up today. I think Gloria mentioned something like that too.
Okay, Susan?
Yeah.
I'm with Timothy, and I've realized that when people start talking, they're interested in whether they're going to be met or not met. And if someone is an introvert, they usually put up a little flag, like, I'm going to start with something real safe and see if you're going to be here, and then I'll get around to what's really important to me. And if it's an extrovert, I think they just begin talking, and they think by talking, they get deeper and more real and more alive when we listen well. I think it's really critically important that people get beyond their introductory remarks. And so often we want to tell them about ourselves, and they are lost. So give them a chance to talk 3 times or so before we go back to what's all about us in the regular everyday conversation.
Okay. And I wanted to say, Kelly, did you have anything to say? No, you maybe, okay. And I see Shayla, you wanted to say something, please. And also I want to say that I was being flip. If there's something really important, because we have to move on, but if it's something really important, please, comment. Sorry, Shayla, go ahead.
No worries. Thank you. I know I'm a little bit out of turn here, but I just wanted to share something that I also learned last week that may be pertinent to what Joni and Bea brought up. And that is, for me, what I learned was the final goal. First of all, we already know that it's all about acceptance and not agreement in an empathy circle formula. But the final goal, what I learned was for me to accept myself. Self-acceptance and self-empathy comes first. And when I do that, then it's easier to accept the other person. And again, it's only about accepting someone for who they are and not making any judgments, as we already know, and not necessarily to even agree with them. And so when we approach a circle with that kind of attitude, I found it to be pretty enlightening. So thank you all.
Okay. And is there anything? Okay. Remember, you can bring anything that you want into the empathy circle when we go into the breakout room. So I invite you to do that. And then I'll give it off to Timothy, who will do the breakout room description, and then we'll go into our breakout room.
Yeah, I'm just going to review what we're going to do in our small breakouts here, and just to give you a sense of where we're going today. Remember, our intention in this 5th session of our training is to really just harvest, harvest all of our learnings, talk about our next steps, and then really talk about what's alive for us around that. So this next, when we break out, it's just an empathy circle, and it's for integrating our experiences and our learnings. Also harvesting feedback about the training, if you have anything you want to suggest about the training to improve it for sure in the future. So we're going to have 5-minute turns, so you get to go a little deeper, 5-minute turns. And we're going to go until about 15 minutes in the circle, and then we'll to the top of the hour. So we'll have like a nice 45-minute debrief at the end to talk as a whole group. So it's a chance for us all to go deeper in smaller groups. Now the topics, we're going to have this posted in the chat. What are your most valuable learnings from this training? What are they? What are your next steps with applying empathy circles, or share whatever's alive for you? So let's see, I'm going to pull this and put it in the chat right now. And then, oh, there we go. Thank you, Edwin. Yeah, so Edwin's going to send us off. And I think we've got about an hour and 15 minutes together. Great, thank you. I'm just doing a plain old, good old-fashioned empathy circle process.
Right, so we have group 1 is Bill facilitating, number 2, Kelly, and room 3 is Susan. So here we go into the room. See you in an hour and 15 minutes. And your group stays here, Bill.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'll be with you.
Okay. All right.
So Susan, there she goes.
There she goes. Okay, so now we're all here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first of all, this is a good chance if you still want to, does somebody want to facilitate this breakout room? Elizabeth, Dominic, or Gloria? Would you like some practice? It's a good chance. So.
Just making sure, are we starting from the very beginning where we treat everyone like it's their first time in empathy circle?
No. This is, we're not going to do the how-to. Everybody knows how to do it. You just simply get a little practice, and there are no challenges. The topics, most valuable learnings, next step, applying, or whatever is alive for you. And then we just go in a normal breakout room. So I just wanted to give,
I can start.
All right, so Gloria, you're going to keep time, 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Sure. I have to leave at like 2:35 to go get my vaccine. So just FYI.
Okay, sure.
Sorry.
It's good and good. Congratulations. That's yeah. I hope you'll be out hugging people very soon. Okay. All right, Gloria. So do you feel ready to take it away?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I'll start with the topic of what was the most valuable thing we have learned in Empathy Circle, and if there's any volunteer to start the circle, please go ahead.
I can start. Bill, would you be my listener?
I'd be happily. Yeah.
So one of the most valuable things I've learned from this training is how, even though I think I'm a pretty empathetic person, when I get into difficult conversations with people that I'm very close to, I have a tendency to not be a very empathetic listener at all.
So you're saying that you consider yourself a pretty empathetic person, but you notice that when you're in a conversation with people who you're very close to and you know very well, you find that you're not as empathetic as you thought you were.
Yeah, especially if we're talking about a topic that I feel more educated about, or that I've spent more time researching or listening to people about. I just sort of spout off things that are facts or things that I believe without really paying attention to what the other person is trying to tell me. So it just ends up being a fruitless conversation because I'm not really listening to what the other person's saying.
So you're saying that especially in situations where you've done due diligence and you've really researched something and you feel that your knowledge base is bigger than the other person or deeper, you find yourself just simply lecturing them and not really having a conversation.
Yes, exactly. So I have done a couple of empathy circles on my own, and I have another one today. So I haven't done one every week, but even without that, I feel like a lot of this training has affected me personally. And so even if I don't end up having like super regular empathy circles, it's something that I think about so much more now. And I will, I'm sure, pay closer attention in the future to what I am doing in conversation like that.
So even though you may not be practicing empathy circles every minute of every day, that just being in this empathy circle has made you more self-reflective about how your listening skills are and whether you're really hearing people, effectively.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, sure. All right. I'll talk to Dominic.
Yeah, sounds good.
So yeah, I always fascinated by how difficult things with people that you're really close. You have so many assumptions, you know them so well, and then you also have, especially with partners or siblings or things like that, you have these long-running like emotional things that go on that are below your consciousness. And you just find yourself repeating these, like the subject might be something, but you find that there's, why did I do that? What am I trying to say? Sorry, this is very difficult to reflect. Just that when you're close to people, sometimes it's very hard for you to take perspective. That's the essence of what I'm trying to say.
So I hear you're fascinated about how hard it is to take perspective of people you're really close to, and that sometimes we kind of switch back to our unconscious behaviors because we've known them for so long.
Yeah. So what I find is that there's several things happening in an empathy circle. One is the discussion and the experience of listening to people without judgment. And then the second part is what happens to what I will call here your emotional body. There's a sort of relaxation. There's some shifts being taken place that don't quite, that defy, categorization or definition. I'll stop there.
Okay, so I hear you're observing the two types of experiences that happen in the empathy circle. One of them being kind of a verbal cognitive discussion of what's going on. The second being more of like a felt in the body experiential aspect of it that can't really be categorized.
Yeah. So like the one thing is like, there's one thing to say, okay, this is the way I feel, but there's nothing when you're kind of saying, although it's unsaid, I'm ready to just be present with you for 5 minutes, uncritically. And that is something that we don't get a lot in our even in close relationships, and I think that excuse me, that produces a shift, an emotional shift. Stop there.
I hear that you're noticing that in everyday life, we don't normally have 5 minutes of unfocused or a focused, unjudgmental attention on us. And that phenomenon produces a shift in our bodies.
Yeah. So I always think when in building a culture of empathy, like if we go outside, right, people have wallets on chains and they, we're all defended and we might be mugged or it might be a shooting or something like that for no reason. And I was just, what if you went out and, and you're feeling frazzled and instead of worrying more, you'd say to yourself, God, if I really feel bad, I can turn to somebody next to me and they'll just listen to me for 5 minutes. That's sort of like my culture of empathy moment. I'll stop there.
Mm-hmm. I hear you're bringing up a thought experiment of, what if we went out in the world and in reaction to our negative emotions, turned to a safe space in a friend rather than following it up and kind of guarding ourselves more.
Yeah, except I'm much more ambitious than that. I'll say everybody has learned how to do this. And so I could be on the subway and instead of having a beef with someone, I'm feeling bad. I drop a package. Oh, excuse me. And instead of the person saying, get out of my way, they say, oh, do you need 5 minutes of listening? I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I hear it's like more of a vision of the whole world of if everyone has this training, rather than causing conflict in the streets, someone will turn around and say like, can I listen to you? And like,
right. And just to wrap up, instead of seeing weakness and then looking for, to exploit that weakness, it's like weakness. Oh, I've got to support that person. And then that's it. And then I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah. Rather than seeing weakness and then immediately wanting to exploit it, the shift comes to, I want to support that person and help them.
Thank you, Dominic. I feel very heard.
Yes, of course. Yes, Gloria, can you listen?
Yes, of course.
Okay. First, I apologize if I'm really slow today because I'm sleep deprived. But yeah, what are my most valuable learning? Oh, sorry. I like Elizabeth, I feel like it brought more awareness on my conversational habits and kind of in my shortcomings of, very similar to Bill. Like I really don't listen to my younger brother and we live with each other and we have so many conflicts every day. I'll stop there. So
at first you mentioned that you're feeling a bit out of yourself right now because you're sleep deprived, but you mentioned that the empathy circle helped you see what you're lacking a little bit in your conversational skills, especially with the people who you're close with, like your younger brother, because you never listen to him. Yeah, I notice it's I assume that I know what he's thinking because he's 20 now, so my 20 years of my life I've been with this kid, and I feel like I don't even need to ask him. I could read his mind, but it's totally not true. So you feel like that tendency to not listen to him comes from your belief that you know about him and you assume that you know everything about him since you've been in his life for this entire 20 years of life. Yeah. So this training kind of made me much more aware of that. And also it made me aware of the fact that when I'm in conflict, I don't like to really think from the other perspective, which is I don't like. Like I have one friend in my friend group who is kind of resistant to the empathy circle. And I've used his behavior as the model of the challenges. And this week there was another conflict of, I kind of wanted to set up an empathy circle with my friends. And he's kind of like, can we just like chit chat and like just chill this tonight? And in my group messenger. And so I had to like kind of push back again or something. So you're facing a little bit of conflict when trying to make an empathy circle with your friend group because there's this one person who's a bit reluctant to the idea of holding an empathy circle with his friends and whatnot, and that's making it a bit of a challenge to you to hold an empathy circle with your friend group. Yeah, and I had to kind of just say, this is one of my last weeks having to actually host it
So, kind of trying to maybe make sure or see if he wants to help more. I also talked to my other friends and they all love it. It's just this one person is kind of more vocal about how he's like, can we just, and he's being nice about it, but it definitely made me wonder if I'm being too pushy with it and kind of like forcing my own needs onto the group. I'll stop there.
So you've been trying several times and you tried different tactics like asking him for help per se, and everyone else was pretty cooperative, except for that one person. Although he was being nice, it was very hard to bring him into the circle. And since this is our final week, it makes you feel like you're being too pushy to him and become more careful about asking him for participation.
Yeah, and I think I fail in empathizing with the fact that, it's uncomfortable for him, and that maybe like I see a lot of value in these circles because it feels very, that body shift that Bill was talking about. I feel that very like strongly, and I don't know if this friend has felt that yet, because I don't know if he's fully leaned into the exercise yet. So all my other friends who are more he's like the least emotionally aware kid in my group. So like I think there might be a correlation there because he might not have leaned in.
So you feel like you think the friend needs more time for the circle because he's less emotionally lean, like he's less aware about his emotions. And you mentioned something at the beginning about was it Bill or Edwin talking about you just have to wait for him and be more empathetical to him about how he's feeling towards Empathy Circle.
Yeah, almost. I mentioned that like Bill's like the shift in the body that comes from feeling heard. I kind of mentioned that I feel that, but I think my friend hasn't felt that yet.
I see. So it was Bill saying that okay. Oh, yeah, you're not quite sure if your friend is feeling that way, but you do feel like you need to give him more time to bring him into the circle and hold it with your entire friend group.
Yeah. Thank you, Gloria. I feel fully heard.
Thank you. Elizabeth, would you be my listener?
I would love to.
Thank you. So I think the most valuable thing I learned in Empathy Circle, alike to what Dominic and you said, is to be aware of how I tend to just talk too much and doesn't give enough time to listen to other people.
So for you, one of the most valuable things about the Empathy Circle training, similar to Dominic and me, is that you're learning more about yourself and noticing your tendencies in conversation to talk more than you leave time for you to listen.
Right. I think, and I really to know my place. There are moments that I could probably just stay quiet because even if the question or idea sounds absurd to me, it might not be, but I just tend to like intrude the conversation with my opinion. And I feel like Empty Circle just taught me how to stay silent, and other people is just sharing their thoughts.
So another thing empathy circles have taught you is that when you're listening to a conversation and you feel like you have something, an opinion or a thought to add, you don't necessarily always have to do that. You can just listen and hear other people instead of interjecting what you think.
Exactly. And this is helping me to think about how I could run my team and whatnot, because if there's a group project and whatnot, we always start with making ideas, but it just taught me that when you're making ideas, you don't have to be too picky about those things. Like let your team members just share their thoughts and feel free to share their thoughts, not to feel belittled about how other people will judge you and whatnot.
So I'm hearing that you can apply what you've learned in the empathy circles to like group projects in school when you all come together to share ideas for what you should do. You think it would be valuable for everybody to be able to share their ideas without judgment instead of being worried that somebody's not going to like their idea. And coming from a place of empathy and listening would give the opportunity for everybody to share what they're thinking.
And I thought I was being really I forgot that word. What was that word called? Being oh, it just slipped my head. But nobody wants to be judged, and I don't want to feel judged. But the fact that I've been doing the same thing to other people just was a very humbling lesson to be taught. And yeah, it just helped me to be more careful about my everyday conversation with people, and really utilize the value that I value in my everyday life.
So I'm hearing that you realize that you don't want to be judged, and nobody really wants to be judged, but you didn't realize until the empathy circles helped you come to terms with the fact that you actually have been judgmental to people without noticing it. So this has helped you be more cognizant and aware of how you're acting in your everyday conversations, and to help you be less judgmental and more open to listening.
And what I appreciate about the empathy circle is that it gave me the opportunity to practice what we all been theoretically taught before, because I heard about talking with I feel this way or whatnot, but I never really had an active chance to practice those skills. And to have the space where I could practice those things without feeling scared to make mistakes was really helpful. And it just made it more clear what's my problem and how I'm supposed to utilize those skills.
So I'm hearing that we've all probably been taught at some point how to be a good listener or what the rules are for being a good listener, but we never really get this opportunity like the empathy circles where we can actually sit down and practice doing it. So that's been really helpful to you to be able to put the theory into practice, and then get to see for you personally, where are the areas that you need to work on for being a good listener.
Yes, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I feel fully heard.
You are welcome. Edwin, can I choose you to be my listener?
Yep, I'm listening.
Okay, I just need to think real quick about what I want to say. So I have been in a lot of job interviews recently, and I've been trying to leave my current job for like 2 years now. And yesterday I was told by one of the jobs that I applied for that I should expect an official offer this weekend for the job. So I'm really excited, but it is also kind of weird because I've been trying so hard to leave for so long, and now it is most likely actually happening finally.
Yeah, so you've been trying for 2 years to get a new job. You've been applying at a lot of places, and now they've said they're to expect an offer, and you're like excited, but it seems kind of weird that all this work trying to get a new job and now it's kind of on the cusp of happening.
And so one of my feelings is that historically, whenever I leave a job, whether it's because I'm quitting or just because I'm moving away and so I have to leave, I'm very easily emotionally attached to things and places and people. So I've been at this job for 3.5 years, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be very rough when I leave. Even though I want to leave so bad, it's going to be really hard on me to leave the people that I like and the building that I've been coming to every day. So like, I know it's going to be very conflicting because I'm excited to leave, but it's also going to be like emotionally draining and sad.
Yeah, so you're just seeing the conflict that you want to leave, you want to go to this new place, but you have all these attachments, and you know, just leaving those is going to be very sad, and so there's a real conflict there.
And my other conflict is that there are so many people at this job I'm about to leave, many of whom are elected officials, who I think are actively like making really bad choices, and they have a lot of power, and I think they're doing a lot of harm to my community. And I've never been able to say anything because I work for them. So now my instinct is that I really just want to go off on everybody and say what I really think. But I know that's probably not wise. So I've just been thinking about, like, I'm really going to have to be careful about what I let myself say, especially in my last few days, because it is really tempting just to say what I haven't been able to say for so long.
Yeah, so you've been keeping a lot of feelings bottled up in your job because you can't kind of express yourself about it, because it's like criticisms or concern about the elected officials, what they're doing, and you kind of want to let it out, but then you feel like, oh, I got to kind of hold it in too. Should be a little bit more cautious about in these last days. A bit of a push-pull kind of.
Yeah. And then my last area of being conflicted is that, again, I'm really excited to leave, but also I really like the people that I work with in my specific office. And I think that I'm a really valuable asset to the team. And so when I leave, I think there's going to be a big space that is not going to be filled, because I'm the strongest in many of the skills that we need in our office. And so I feel bad, especially for my boss, that, like, I know I'm really valuable to her and I'm gonna leave. So that's like another conflict where I'm like, I'm sorry, but I have to go.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different conflicts and the other conflict is that you want to leave, you know, you're needing to go, but the other is you have concern about the well-being there. You see there's going to be a space that, you know, they're going to maybe struggle without your skills and expertise there. So you have concern for their well-being too.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay, great. Dominic, then speak to you.
Yeah.
So just thinking about, you know, what to say as well. I like to sort of speak with something that comes kind of out of this part of my body. Right now, I'm feeling sort of a space, and I'm waiting for inspiration. I want something inspiring to say. So I'm kind of waiting for inspiration.
Okay, yeah, I hear that you're opening up some space and trying to see what comes up.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, I'll work at the computer and I'm pushing, and then I feel, I'm kind of disconnected from myself. And then I go over to my little sofa there, you know, lay down, and I just wait for some idea to come up, you know, that just, you know, just that it comes up without having to push for it. Yeah.
So I hear that when you're working on the computer, sometimes you feel disconnected from yourself, and the solution to that is kind of just lying down and just seeing what naturally comes up and not pushing too hard.
And so the main thing I've been working on is the design of the training. You know, how do we keep improving and building on the design? And there was one activity that I was just reading in a book that I thought would be good, is to do 1 hour empathic listening. That one of the options is, you know, you can do an empathy circle, but you can also just listen to someone for like an hour with empathic listening.
Okay, so I hear you're planning the design for the training, and an idea that's come up is an hour of empathic listening. So like there's an option to do an empathy circle, or there's an option to just empathically listen for a full hour.
Yeah, so with your friend who's like, oh, I'm kind of resistant to this, is, well, how about I just listen to you empathically for 1 hour about, whatever is sort of alive for you, and you just do what we're doing here, how you're listening to me, but you're doing it for that person for 1 full hour, and see how the experience is for them.
Okay, so a solution you're proposing for my problem friend is kind of suggesting that I listen for an hour rather than doing the back and forth of the empathy circle and just seeing what comes up.
Yeah, so they don't have to do the listening. They can just experience what it's like to be heard. And it's like, oh, that feels pretty good, hopefully, and then they'll be maybe wanting to take sort of the next step. Plus, you get to practice the active listening or the empathic listening for a full hour.
So yeah, I hear that they might have the experiential aspect they might be missing of feeling fully heard. And then I would also be able to actually, flex the active listening muscle as well.
Yeah, and there's some videos. Carl Rogers, who really developed this practice, he spent like 20, 30 years just in therapy, listening to people in a therapeutic context. And there's recordings of him listening to people. And so you can really learn a lot just by observing. So I'm just thinking as an activity to add that. So I'm kind of excited. Yeah, I feel some excitement about this. This will be, and then see how it sort of lands on, participants, how it works. I think it could be really good.
Yeah, so I hear there's some videos about Carl Rogers, who's worked for 20 to 30 years on active listening, and that there's videos online. And I hear that you're feeling excited about the prospect of introducing that into the training and kind of experimenting with how people react to it.
And then another activity is, I was hearing I don't feel like the connection is deep enough, they're wanting deeper connections. So we could actually do an empathy circle. Like we have 3 weeks, so we're going to just be doing Saturday empathy circles. One of the topics might be like, how do we connect more deeply with each other in this empathy circle? So it becomes a topic, and we just sort of explore that together. Like, how do we really connect more deeply? Yeah.
So yeah, you're addressing the concern of a couple people saying, I don't feel as fully heard with it, and you're addressing that by the next 3 weeks, maybe proposing a topic saying like, how do we connect more deeply within the empathy circle, and kind of just really addressing it directly.
Yeah, I really appreciated. That's my time. I'll pause. I'll stop there. I feel fully heard.
Oh.
I can always talk for hours.
Thanks. I appreciate the insight. I guess Bill, will you listen to me?
Sure.
Sweet. I want to respond to Edwin, I guess, about that's a really good idea about the empathic listening, because I don't know, I think my friend just kind of wants to just say something right away. Like he just wants it to. I posted an empathy circle with just him, and we did a couple rounds, and he was just like, can we just talk? And then we kind of turned into a conversation.
So you thought that Edwin's suggestion is really good, that your friend, that might be what he's needing. And you tried to have an empathy buddy call with him, and then he just kind of said, can we just talk? But, if you just were focused on listening and reflecting, that might be a different experience.
Yeah, because I've also noticed this friend doesn't go very, he stops at the surface level when he shares. Kind of like, logistically, what am I doing? And then that's it. But my other friends kind of go deeper. And so I wonder if the hour of active listening would kind of, I predict it would make him a little uncomfortable at first, but I wonder if it will push him past that and say how he's really feeling.
So this particular friend tends to stay on the surface, kind of, that non-deep subjects. And you're wondering that if you just gave him that hour, that would help him go deeper and get into things.
Yeah, and he's hinted that it's hard. Like he said things like it's pretty hard to just exist right now. Nothing too. I don't think it's too concerning, but I think he acknowledges he's having some struggles. But I think the best thing therapeutically would listen and to be listening to him. like on another level besides trying to get the empathy circle going. I think it would be helpful for my friend to be heard.
So you also notice that your friend is under a bit of stress and said it's very hard to kind of exist right now. And so although you don't think that he's, it's a serious situation, you do believe that he's calling out for some, to be heard.
Yeah, so I think that active listening is a very interesting idea that I'm definitely going to propose. Yeah, and I guess that's been on my mind mostly. Like, how do I not be too controlling of people, but also trying to kind of organize kind of a group activity weekly? Because I've been facilitating a weekly like happy hour thing with my friends, and that shifted into an empathy group thing. So I kind of want to keep it going.
Okay, so you're looking at providing enough structure, but not to be too controlling. And that you had an empathy, you had a happy hour thing, and that kind of evolved into the empathy circle. And I sensed some reflection on, am I being too heavy-handed, or what do I do, or, some questions about it. Not serious questions, but some questions.
Yeah, and another takeaway from the training in reflecting on how I converse is like I acknowledge I really like talking about the deep stuff with people. Just in most of my conversation, it's normally just kind of under the surface. I'll start like, how are you doing? Like on a deeper level. This training has made me reflect on like, maybe, there's a silliness aspect of myself that I'm neglecting more because I'm so focused on like, I really love psychology and therapy and thinking about this stuff, but maybe the lighthearted part of me is kind of being neglected.
So you're thinking and reflecting on your own nature, which is that you really like therapeutic, deep conversations, and looking into under the hood of our psyche. But that possibly it might be nice to just kind of lighten up and enjoy some lighthearted things, and that might lead to something later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks. I feel fully heard.
Okay, great. All right, Elizabeth, did you listen to me?
I would.
Okay. So I some great ideas, and I think that that sort of the act of listening to someone else is sort of like the nuclear atom of the empathy circle. I'll stop there.
Okay, so you see the act of listening to somebody as the center of an empathy circle and what is sort of holds it together.
Yeah. I mean, in again, co-designing and thinking about the course, and then also like when we go out in street actions, we don't say, "Hey, do you want to come and have an empathy circle?" and then show them the video, and then we say, "Do you want to be? Here's a card. You get 10 minutes of free listening." And so that's something that people, oh, some stranger's going to listen to me. There it is. Oh, okay. All right. And of course, and that's an easier thing. There are two questions. One is saying, "Hey, do you have 10 minutes? We'll just listen." Oh, wow. Nobody's ever done that. The other one is, you want to participate in a 2-hour thing? Oh, and we have to wait to gather some people here. So it's an easier lift to do the 10 minutes of listening. I'll stop there.
Okay, so as opposed to like actually facilitating an empathy circle with multiple people, it can be more intriguing or interesting to people who aren't familiar with it if you just say, "Hey, do you want to come be listened to? Do you want some free empathy?" And that is more enticing to people because nobody really ever offers that.
Yeah. It's just it's a less of a commitment, and and you only need one person. And so one of the things that I've said that the idea that I came up with is a T-shirt that just says "designated listener." And so like the designated hitter in baseball. And so that you just say, "I'll give you free," you just And then people would start to wear these t-shirts and then listen to people throughout the day. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so one of the ideas you had was for a t-shirt that just says designated listener. And so people who are trained in the empathy circles can just wear the t-shirt in their daily lives and just always be available to listen to somebody empathically.
Right. Now I realize that can cause some complications. So it's not a fully baked idea. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so it is a part of an idea that could go somewhere, but it's not, the details haven't been figured out yet.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things and the learnings that I get is when I see anything, when I see riots, when I see violence, again, in my work, I dealt with a lot of violent families and kids. And when a kid acted out violently, we'd gather up and we'd say, what's the communicative intent of this action? Kid gets up, throws a chair or a book. Well, why did they do that? And every time there is a communicative intent. Doesn't seem like it. From the outside, it's just like spontaneous, but they're trying to say something. And when we were able to identify what they were trying to say and address it, the violence went down. I'll stop.
So in your professional experience, you dealt with a lot of violent families or violent children. And whenever there was an outburst of violence from a kid, your response to that would be to try to figure out what is the kid trying to communicate, even though it seems like they're just acting out or throwing a fit. Your goal would be to figure out what the kid is actually trying to tell you, because they are trying to say something. And once you can figure out what the kid is trying to say, and to be heard about, then the violence reduces once they're actually heard.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I feel fully heard.
Okay. Gloria, would you listen to me?
Of course.
I have to think again. Okay, so I'm not sure if this came up before or if I just heard something that sounded close to it, and so then I started thinking about it. But one of the reasons that I think it's hard for me to have conversations with my family that are sort of more tense topics is there's so much background in our relationship with each other that I assume something about their motives. Like, especially with my mom, she'll say something and I put a lot of motivations on what she's saying without actually knowing what her motivation is. I'm just assuming that she's really trying to say this, and then I get defensive.
So one thing that you find hard to bring this empathetical conversation into your family members because you know so much about them that you put a lot of meaning and motives behind their words, even though they didn't say that motivation in front of you, and you just think it that way because you have all those informations in the history.
Yeah, so even if my mom says something totally normal, and maybe she does have motivations that would create conflict, I just sort of jump ahead in the conversation and call her out, which makes it hard for us to just have like casual conversations because I'm assuming what she's really trying to say is blank. So then I probably come off as a very difficult person to deal with.
So you find it hard to hold just a casual conversation with your family member, like example for your mom, because even if she says something that's something that might not have any meaning, you kind of bring meaning into that line, making the conversation a bit more tense than it could have not been.
Yeah. But so I also think that part of what I want to do is be able to talk to her specifically, like honestly and deeply. So she'll try to have a casual conversation without getting too deep about like current events or politics or my mental health. And it's hard for me because I don't find small talk very, like, I don't feel like it serves me very well. So I would rather get really deep with her and talk about what's really going on. But then that usually causes conflict between us.
So the another thing that you find the source of conflict is because I guess it's the preference. You prefer to talk about deeper topics while your mother tries to be more casual about things. She doesn't want to go into those deep topics, but we just want to have a conversation, a casual conversation with you. And that difference of preference sometimes brings a conflict between you two.
So I guess I'm just trying to like be more aware of how I'm responding to her, because I think it is more important for her to have more frequent conversation with me that doesn't go very deep. And even though that's not super interesting to me, I guess I think I should try harder to like let the little conversations happen, because that's what makes her feel connected to me. Even though I don't feel the same way, I think it's not like she's I should be able to try harder to meet her where she is.
So now you feel like you should meet her needs a bit more, although it's not really your thing to do small talks all the time, but you feel like you could make a bit more advance to your mom by making more time to just have those little talks, more frequent talks, even though it's not about deep topics. You can spend a bit more time with your mom in that manner.
Yeah, thank you, Gloria.
Of course. Dominic?
Yeah.
Yeah. Your talk and Elizabeth's talk made me think about my relationship with my family too, but I think this is where empathy gets hard because it makes me it's really the matter of, do I want to have an empathetical talk with this person or not whether can I do it.
Okay, so I hear you were reflecting on your own family relationships and kind of boiling it down to a question of not if you can have this type of talk, but if you really want to have one.
Right, and I feel like a lot of people, including myself, have made has talked about this, but empathetical talk is actually really draining. I don't know, but it's just as I'm just sitting down and listening to this person, I have to tell myself to stay quiet and just listen. And it's not for granted that the person sitting in front of me would do the same thing to me, although it's happening in the empty circle. It's not for granted in real life.
Okay, so I hear that empathetic conversations might feel draining because it requires effort on your part to kind of quiet your own thoughts and really listen to someone. And on top of that, it's not guaranteed that they'll do the same in real life.
Right. And it's more complicated because it's not just a single relationship between me and just a single person. If it's a family member, it's about my dad, it's about my mom, it's about my sister. It's just to be at the center of that three relationships that form with these three individuals, to make a balance in between those things while being empathetical towards them is just a bit exhausting.
So I hear to be like the listener for those three people is more draining than it would be for you and just one other person going back and forth. So I hear, yeah, it'd be draining to kind of specifically within the family system, it's harder.
Right. And I feel like especially in my culture or other people's culture, it's just like you have this certain responsibility for your parents, and but then it's I feel like I don't want to be empathetical anymore towards them.
So yeah, I hear you're relating it to like culture and the fact that, you know, there's this responsibility to take care of your parents to an extent, but I hear that maybe that responsibility makes it harder to want to empathize with them.
Yeah, and maybe I shouldn't have said culture because it's more like imposed upon me and my siblings from really from my dad. And I think I don't know, in my selfish thoughts, I think he had enough.
Yeah, so I hear that less of culture, but more of kind of a parenting style that your dad has passed on to kind of tell you and your siblings to take care of your parents as they get old. But in your mind, it's kind of, they've had enough.
Right. And like it's a bit complicated family, whatever, but my siblings are a lot older than I am. They're like in their 40s and 50s. And whenever I see them, although I only meet them like once a year, it just they look very exhausted when it comes to the topic of my parents. And I think this is why I talked about in the session before our breakout room that every person needs an equal chance to be heard, because it's been imposed too much on my sisters and my brother to be the listener, and I don't feel like they were ever heard by my dad or whatnot.
Yeah, so I hear you say it's a bit of a complicated situation because your siblings are much older than you are. But when you see them once a year, that they seem really exhausted from taking care and listening to your dad a lot. And that related back to your point in the circle about how everyone needs a chance to be heard, because it seems that there might be an unequal power dynamic between your dad and your siblings in terms of listening.
Right. And yeah, it just makes me reflect on what is my boundary when it comes to empathetical listening and conversation. And I'll stop there.
Okay, so yeah, I hear it kind of makes you reflect on what's the boundary for empathetic listening, like when is it too much?
Thank you for listening. I feel fully heard.
Yeah, of course. Who have I not? Elizabeth, I think I haven't. Okay.
1 second, my alarm is going off, so I have to go turn it off.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no worries.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. I think I want to continue on Gloria's theme of family. I just was thinking it'd be nice to have it'd be difficult, but meaningful to have a family empathy circle sometime during dinner. Because we have me, my younger brother, and my parents here. My older brother lives in San Francisco, but it's just the four of us.
Okay, so continuing on with the discussion of empathetic listening within a family, sometimes you think it might be helpful, although difficult, to have an empathy circle with your parents and your little brother just while you're eating dinner.
Yeah, and I think like specifically my dad doesn't go under the surface at all, and I wonder if he has the capacity to sometimes. So I think it'd be a funny like exercise to, I don't know, like me and my mom go under the surface, my brother and my dad don't really.
So you especially think it would be interesting to see if your dad would participate, and if he even could participate, because he doesn't usually go below the surface in like deeper conversation, unlike you and your mom, who do have that tendency.
Yeah, so I think it'd be cool. Yeah, just to see what comes up. You know, like I just kind of related it to my my friend who might need to be heard. Like I wonder how many people ask my dad what's up, you know, like he said a few weeks ago, he's like, yeah, when you get to my age, your conversations are just like more logistical and kind of on the surface. And I was wondering, like, is that true? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So bringing up the idea of your friend who you think might just need some time to be heard, you're wondering if your dad has things to say but just doesn't have the opportunity to share and be heard. And he's mentioned to you that at his age, your conversations just become logistical and less deep and insightful, but you're wondering whether it really is true that it's because of his age.
Yeah, exactly. And part of me wonders if it's because he grew up without the internet and kind of without that language coming up, because he's like a business person. So it's all, you know, numbers and results and profit and all that stuff. So I don't know. I really wonder about like how my parents became my parents a lot. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you're wondering if maybe part of the reason why he doesn't share on a deeper level is because he didn't grow up with the internet, and he's works in business, and so the topics of conversation are probably usually just about the business and how do we make more profit. And also you've been reflecting on how exactly did the people you know as your parents come to be those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was having a conversation with like one of my childhood friends, and she said her dad's the same way, and that her solution was to kind of, she was like, oh yeah, I just talked to him about these specific things, and that kind of forms our relationship. But what I took away from that is like, is there a possibility where we can kind of, I can expand it to be, so I don't have to just select what I say to my dad, and maybe we get to mutual understanding of different interests, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So you have a friend who told you that her dad is very similar to your dad, and so she just sticks to a certain set of topics that she talks to him about, and that's the extent of what they discuss. But I'm hearing that you're wondering if there's a way where you can not be stuck to a specific list of topics, but be able to expand the options of topics of discussion to have with your dad.
Yeah, exactly. And part of it is that he doesn't seem as curious about what I'm interested in, but that could be a result of me not showing curiosity in what he's interested in. So it could stem from me more than, I feel like there's this idea that the parent should provide everything, but I think I'm 22 years old. I think I'm also an adult, and I could, I guess maybe it's contrasting with Gloria, because like my parents didn't really ask for much. Thanks. And that's my time. Yeah. So yeah.
Uh-huh. So your dad doesn't seem to show a lot of interest in or curiosity in the things that interest you, but you're wondering if maybe that is partially because you haven't shown the curiosity in what he's interested in. So maybe you're an adult now, he's an adult, maybe there's more that you should be giving him in terms of listening and empathy in order to help that relationship go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Cool. Bill, would you be my listener?
Happily, sure.
So I don't have to think about what to talk about now, because Dominic just reminded me of this whole issue that I'm having, which is having empathy for my parents. Mm-hmm. Broadly speaking, because I think that I'm naturally an introspective person, and I have learned so much over the past 5 or 6 years about in not interrogating, but questioning my assumptions about people and about different cultures and about my belief systems. And I think it's made me a better and more empathetic person. And my parents are so much older than me and have their own life experiences, but I don't get the feeling that they have ever done this type of introspection. Okay, I'll stop there.
Okay, so you find that in your own self-growth, you find you think, feel that you're an introspective person, and you've done self-examination and examine your beliefs and things like that and assumptions you have, and you've seen changes and it's made you a better person. But you feel that there's a sort of a disconnect, possibly cultural due to age, with your parents, that they haven't done the same or ascribed the importance to doing the same sort of introspective work as you have.
Yeah, and it's sort of frustrating sometimes, because it's very frustrating a lot of times, because I think I have been doing all this work and it hasn't been easy, but I'm really trying. And I feel like they're just continuing on the way they've always been. And they don't want to get into the deep conversations with me, but it's like, I feel like I'm the one doing the internal work in therapy to try to be a better person, and they just don't think there's any problems. So I feel like I'm doing all the work for this relationship and they're not doing anything.
Right. So you've, through hard-won, personal effort and probably a bit of suffering, you've really evolved yourself. And then you look at your parents, they kind of go along the way they've always gone along. And so in the relationship, you feel that you've done all this introspective work and they sort of it's, the same thing every day. And so you feel like you have to carry the weight of that.
Yeah. And I also feel not very heard by them, because I think that they think that I'm just young and I'm trying out new things and I'll come around eventually and fall back to the way that I was raised. And right now I'm just pushing boundaries or something. Or they think because they're older and have more experience, which I respect, that they do have whole lives, like Dominic was talking about. They came to be these people and I didn't know them for 28 years of their lives. So I feel like they don't respect the work that I've done to try to become a more open, curious, and not educated officially, but more open to hearing other people's points of view and stories. I don't feel like they respect the fact that I've done that. And they don't think it's valuable.
Yeah. So in your relationship with your parents, you've done, again, a lot of this hard work and introspection and thinking. And you feel that with the response you get from your parents towards this is it's like a phase, that it's just something and that they have this, and eventually you'll calm down and come to accept the worldview as they've come to accept it.
Yes. I feel fully heard. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, for sure.
And
Okay.
I do have to leave now to go get my shot. I am so sorry. I kind of forgot what the timing was. So this has been really delightful, and I will see you all again.
Looking
Great.
forward
Look
to
forward
it.
to it.
Great.
Take
Bye.
care.
See you.
Get that vaccine. All right, I'll talk to Edwin.
Listening.
What was it? Yeah, I related to what Elizabeth said. I always think about, although I don't think this is relates to Elizabeth's experience, because I probably, because in my judgment, she, you know, I think she's right that there's a, you know, that there is a cultural rift, and you know, people of a different generation didn't really look under the hood so much. I'll stop there.
So you're sort of agreeing with Elizabeth that different generations are, you know, different, and older generations maybe didn't look so much under the hood.
Right, and I see, and I have a son who's older than Dominic, and then sometimes I feel like, you know, he you know, he needs more life experience. He'll tell me something and I'll say, you know, I'll think to myself, all right, you know, I'll be with him, but he still needs more experience. I'll stop.
Yeah, so you have a son, and you think he needs more experience.
Yeah. So I can see a kind of with both sides. So, but I think that introspection, regardless, self-examination is very valuable, whatever age. And that also there is a gap of understanding between all sorts of classes of people. And I think it would be helpful, even though, you know, older people, I include myself in that, tend to have figured things out or have a certain kind of, you know, ideas that have stood the test of time. You can't lose that openness. You still got to ask a question.
So you're seeing that, you know, there's differences between people, and you really value openness, and you just feel that people should kind of hold on to that openness.
Yeah, that you should
and
never
nurture
be
it.
too old to learn or to have new experiences. And also, that's one of my tried and true, who, you know, when I've seen people who've done that, who've been older, they seem to be a lot happier than people who have just kind of, you know, come into their own shell, and they have their own world, and it's, you know, and then it gets smaller and smaller.
So you have real concern about one's world becoming smaller and smaller because you value openness and learning and growth, and you just think things are better that way.
Yeah.
More well-being.
Yeah, and so I think there's something to wisdom. There's the Mark Twain joke where he said, you know, when I was 18, I thought my parents were the stupidest people in the world. And then I went out into the world and I lived, and I came back to visit them 3 years later, and I couldn't believe how much they had learned in 3 short years.
So you're really taken with Mark Twain's quote about, you know, how we judge our parents maybe as not being so intelligent, but as we get older, we sort of see their wisdom or their
Right,
growth.
right. But I also see that, you know, how that quote unquote wisdom has really put us into a fine pickle in our society, and there's some things that need to be changed, and that so, you know, the dominant paradigm is not always correct.
But you also see that the dominant paradigm is not always correct. You know, with older people, you know, their way of being might not be always correct, and need to maybe make some changes.
Yeah. And so that's why personally I really enjoy the listening in these circles, because when younger people or people different cultures and things like that, I always find something that you know, that's learning, and that keeps me open.
So you're appreciating the young people in these groups because it keeps you open and keeps you learning, which you value.
Right, and not just young people, but people from different cultures, different, you know, sexes, you know, different things, and it all brings it back to common humanity, and you know, we never stop learning. And then I'm done. Thanks.
Okay, so it's maybe about the empathy circle itself. You're meeting so many different people, different cultures, different races, different ages, and just that variety keeps you growing and learning. So it's a real sort of a benefit to the empathy circle.
Thank you, Edwin. I feel fully heard.
Okay, Gloria, then speak to you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just found it so interesting. This topic of family has sort of risen, and I've done various work in my family with empathy circles. So I just thought I'd talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you thought the ongoing topic about family was pretty interesting, and you would like to share some things you've tried out with your family members?
Yeah, so my family, I have been doing this a while, the empathy work, and I talked to my family, parents and so forth, brother and sister about it, and they were like, it's we don't really. They're kind of skeptical about it. So that's sort of that, power dynamics, the empathy and empathy circles can sort of shift power dynamics, right? So there can be sort of a resistance to, kind of doing something new like this.
So a few members of your family was a bit skeptical and a little bit doubtful about this empathy circle thing because, shakes the already established dynamics within the family members, and that kind of it's a bit unsettling for some individuals.
Yeah, exactly. But what happened is a conflict happened in the family kind of on a Christmas, years ago. And I was able to mediate it with empathic listening. So, I listened to the different parties, got them to start listening to each other. It turned into a family empathy circle. And we got to the core of the issue, and it ended with hugs, between the family members. And then I said, by the way, this is empathy, and it's like, oh, this is okay, because they sort of experienced it and they felt the positive, experience of it. So it kind of opened the door for the family members being open to do more empathic listening, and, yeah.
So you wasn't being intentional about it, but there was a conflict between your family members one time during Christmas, and as you were meditating between their conversation and as they were making up and as they were solving the core problem, you're able to naturally introduce them to the idea of empathy circle, and that in some ways solved the problem of skepticism about empathy circle, and then open up the door for them to experience the positive side.
Yeah, and be willing to take some next steps. And so next steps where I mediated a conflict between my sister-in-law and sister. We did an empathy circle mediation. We did a couple others, and then we actually we had some empathy circles. We just had sort of family issues in the empathy circle, and it seemed to work. Yeah, it seemed to work well.
Yeah, so when there's problems within your family members, empathy circle was served as a great tool to um, solve the problems or to solve the conflict and
Yeah.
bring individuals together.
And once we just had a circle for 4.5 hours where we talked about childhood memories. Like, what do you remember, growing up? So it wasn't like a conflict. It was just really interesting, experience. It was kind of very meaningful. I mean, 4.5 hours, right? We're just sitting there in this living room having those conversations.
So you have also very fond memory about everyone sharing their experience of their childhood for 4.5 hours. It's a long time, but it still was a very beneficial and a very comforting moment you spent with your family members.
The thing is how to keep it going too. It's like it does take effort. It's like it's sort of petered out in our family. I mean, because of COVID now, we're not getting together, and they live out in the country, so we can't do Zoom very well because we have bad internet. So it's sort of hasn't kind of maintained. We haven't maintained it, and that's kind of just thinking of how to sort of maintain the empathy circle in the family, because I think it really helps.
So another problem that comes about this empathy circle with family members is how to make it keep going, especially due to pandemic, since everyone's so distant with each other. Zoom can't be the solution all the time, so that's another problem you have to think about. That
Yeah,
was
you kind of broke up there a second, but yeah, that was it.
oh,
And
well,
so,
yeah, because the timer went off. Sorry.
oh, the timer went off. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel fully heard. So I think we just have 4 minutes. So if you,
Should I speak or are we wrapping things up now?
it's up to you what you want to do. If you want to just take sort of a final comments, open it up to discussion, open just how, I don't know, whatever. I don't know, this 4 minutes is gonna go quick.
Yeah.
You just,
Well, I just want to say, Gloria, nice facilitation.
oh, thank you. I feel like
Yeah,
I
it was really nice, nice light touch. It just, felt, just things just flowed. So I really appreciated your facilitation. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll make a comment too, in terms of the empathy circle, it's when everyone's familiar with the practice and has done it, there's not much to the facilitation, you're keeping time. And that's it. It's when people are new to the practice, they're not familiar with it, that you need, that's where a lot of the facilitation comes in. Or if there's a big conflict, like if it's a family conflict and you need to sort of hold the conflict. So those are environments. But the thing with the circle is once everybody sort of knows it, it's like everybody just sort of holds the practice and it makes it a lot easier. Then you can just sort of enjoy it. You can go deeper and have that deeper connection, which some people were wanting.
Dominic?
Yeah, I thought it was nice how the conversation naturally went to family and we kind of all just stayed on the same thread and just pushed it along. It was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like family is an important matter because empathy circle can be easy when it's stranger or someone that you're not gonna live with, because you just have to, okay, I get that you're that kind of person, but when it comes to family member, you can't just do that because you have to live with that idea, you have to live with that difference, you have to live with that conflict. And I think that's what makes it harder for me to bring this and practice with my family members. I just don't want to. Maybe that's the problem. Yeah. So
Well, we'll make it an assignment then.
Okay, so
Your assignment is to hold an empathy circle.
Final week. Not gonna happen.
No, I was thinking we could do it at, even I'm always thinking of the design of the training is maybe even a module, like Bill is working on a module on empathy in schools, but a module on empathy in the family. I think it's a big topic, how do you, it's a real challenge. And some people say, if it works in the family, it'll work anywhere, because that's the biggest challenge is, bringing in something into your family.
Well, but it was an overall pleasant experience. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got about
a
minute here if I close the room.
Wait, so the modules, are they like separate cohorts focusing on one topic?
Yeah, we haven't developed them. I mean, they're still underdeveloped, but that meant they would be another module kind of on a specific topic. So we're kind of been focusing on this first module to get it really, structured. If you can go through the full module, become a trainee, become a trainer, and then you're sort of ready for the next, kind of going deeper. How do you go deeper? Hope there's a time we close the room.
Got it.
Yeah, it's sort of in the development, in the works. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it would be more like topics, like discussion topics rather than training. Are the trainings to become a trainer separate from the modules?
To become a trainer is just doing this again for maybe 2 or 3 more times. You go through, like you see that, Kelly and Susan are trainees. So you actually end up doing a lot of the presentations and you facilitate a breakout circle, like they did, until you can get comfortable with, holding a training and be able to train others. And then, then we can go deeper with like family. At least that's the model we're working on right now. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So it's like the trainee stuff comes first, and then you could go deeper. Okay, cool.
Right.
Okay. I'm gonna use the restroom real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, they take up a break. anyone needs a bio break, Elizabeth had to go. She was getting her COVID shot. So
well, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Welcome back, everyone. We now do 2 rounds of questions. We've saved a little longer time today. We have 2 questions today, and we'll do the first one in a round that I will facilitate. The question is, what did you like about the training? Think about how you have benefited from this training. The second question, facilitated by Bill, will, how do you see the empathy circle practice beginning to build a culture of empathy in your world? In your world, interesting. And Bill, I'd like to tell you that my signal has been cutting in and out occasionally.
Mhm.
So if I disappear, would you just pick up for me? I hope that doesn't happen. I'm sitting right next to my modem. Doesn't seem like it should. So I'd like to call on you. What did you like about this 5-session training? What have been the benefits to you? And Shoshana, will you share with us first, please?
We're going about a minute each, I think, right now. Everyone just put that in the chat. Yes, that's the request. Okay.
Okay, Savannah, would you please start? I may have said your name wrong the first time.
Yeah, that's so just pick on someone then.
No, I'm inviting you to say what you like about the training. And
Oh, okay.
we'll each take a minute or so to respond to this question.
Sorry about that.
Maybe I wasn't clear.
No, you're okay. I liked most about the training was the ability to feel heard, and without any like judgment or invalidity reciprocated to me. That is pretty much it. I just really enjoyed being able to express myself without any fear of resentment. So yeah.
That's profound. That's what we're doing, is trying to have people feel heard and accepted. Thank you. Shyla.
What I learned was the meaning of empathy. I thought I knew the meaning of empathy, but I did not. Basically, what I learned was empathy means being able to listen. And listening is the most important, the foundational building block of this whole circle. And every role in the circle is about listening, including the speaker's role. And that seemed powerful to me because I'd also heard what active listening was before. I had conceptually knew what it was, but then again, it relates to listening and being able to be there for the other person. And then when we first seek to understand the other person, then if the connection happens, then perhaps they can make the effort to understand you.
Thank you, Shyla. Yeah. Joni?
Yeah, I think I learned that when I'm listening to people, whether it's through a circle or just in regular conversations, that people don't just want you to hear what they're saying, they want you to hear what they're feeling. And it's important to kind of reflect that back to people. I think it builds a little bit better connection, but also even if you're not reflective listening in a circle, if you reflect back what people are feeling or ask them, oh, are you feeling this way because you're saying, it makes people feel really heard.
Yeah, the connection through identifying the feelings. Thank you. B?
I really enjoyed seeing everyone like sort of building off of each other and relating to each other. Like, even though we weren't adding back to the conversation, we were reflecting And then whenever it was someone else's turn to speak, they would very frequently call back to something someone else had spoken on. And I just thought it was really nice to see that like connection through empathetic listening.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Wayne?
Sorry, just took a wee time to unmute. For me, the 5 weeks has been really incredible, actually, looking from the outside, watching other people and developing an understanding from that perspective. But what this has done is given me an opportunity to experience within an empathy circle all those elements as they're occurring, and yeah, it's been really, really good. And so yeah, thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Experiencing all the different levels. Dominic.
I've really appreciated getting to know a bunch of people on a personal level through Zoom in a way that it feels like I've been deprived of in the pandemic. Also, it's opened up an inkling of interest, more of an interest in clinical work, because I'm thinking of psychology and just working with people and kind of solving problems in personal lives through empathy has really made me think, leaning more towards that. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, indeed. Clinical work. Dominic and I share that. Gloria.
I think I learned how important it is to have the rules and plan for the session, because it just sets the boundary for people, and it also gives equal opportunity for each person. And yeah, I think that's quite important to run the sessions and to make every person be heard in the conversation. Yeah.
Every person be heard. Yeah, yeah. And Monica.
So something that I really enjoyed about this training was feeling acknowledged, no matter what type of emotions like I felt. My feelings are validated, and I also like that everyone got a chance to speak, because usually, like in real life situations, there's people that tend to take up most of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a couple of minutes. Would anyone like to add a benefit? Looking back over these 5 weeks, I would just like to add my observation that we've come a long way since session 1.
I'll add one. I like the sort of the micro learning. It's like I just feel I can sense all the learning. There's sort of a push, a growth. Everybody's, especially I hear in our group, several participants said that having learned about the empathy here, when I go out into the daily life, I'm more sensitive and aware of my listening, how well I listen to others. And some people say, I didn't realize I wasn't such a good listener, for example, or just sort of noticing. And I think I just see all this sort of learning and growth that's happening around the sort of an awareness of listening and empathy, and also the sense of mutuality. It's like it's not just us listening, but we're mutually listening to each other.
Yeah, so this element of self-awareness has come in many, many times. And we come wanting to listen to one another. And then we learn that we're listening to ourselves in really important and valuable ways. I see Timothy's hand. Hello.
Hello, Susan. Thank you. When you go gambling, the odds are always on the house. And the longer you gamble, the more money you're going to lose. So like you have to get in, get your money, and get out, right? Well, now imagine the empathy circle. The longer you stay in, and the cycles go around and people get a chance to be heard and share, the better it gets and the more the return is. So like trusting that process means that over 5 weeks or even in one empathy circle, we're going to go deeper and get to what's really real. I love that. Like today, I got to swear and get really angry, and people were smiling and welcoming me in my 5 minutes. I didn't take more than my time, but there was that space to just get real about my particular frustrations around lack of empathy, wherever, you know. But it was like, and we each had that space, and then we get to respond to each other. But the longer we stay with it over time, the richer the returns. I love that. Thank you.
And I'm just acknowledging how much we're learning from one another during answering a question like this. So I'll turn it over to Bill for his second question.
Okay. So the prompt that we left you with at the end of the last session was, how do you see the empathy circle practice beginning to build a culture of empathy in your world? And I would like to just, first acknowledge the differences. In many movements or changes, people say, okay, well, we've got to do this, we've got to vote these people out, or we have to, shoot these people, and then the world would be a better place. And without realizing that those actions themselves shape us, and basically, to quote the Who, here comes the new boss, same as the old boss. And so now, though, we are really creating mini cultures of empathy in right here. And so we're not doing anything different. We're actually creating the world that we want to see. So I just wanted to reflect on that, and then maybe make a comment about how do you see your own personal experience of being heard and hearing others, like pebbles in the pond, you ripple out and creating change in the world as you see it. So I'll call on people. Again, just to say, how do you see the empathy circle practice beginning to build a culture of empathy in your world and beyond? And Dominic?
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on a nice thought, like build the world you want to live in, right? So my first thought is, like, one of my friends called it the knowledge economy. Like, if you teach something to one person, they'll go on to teach it. And I think that's how I see it spreading, because when I've introduced it to people in my personal life, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. And it's been a quick, like, there's something here for sure. So I think spreading that idea to more and more people instead of keeping it within myself is the way I could see it growing.
Thanks, Dominic. Gloria?
Yeah, I agree with Dominic, because it's just the matter of having experienced the benefit or not. And it doesn't have to be like, let's hold an empathy circle. Like, if I just practice what I learned from here and let people feel what it's like to be heard and to hear from other people in an empathetical way, I think that just grows out from that one action. And just like what Dominic said, it's just going to spread out to more people and hopefully the world.
Thank you, Gloria. Savannah?
So in our group, we kind of talked about this a little bit, of the fact that people kind of have to be willing and accepting of their own feelings, and that I do think this is very beneficial for people, but you have to find the people who are willing to go along with it. Some people aren't really accepting of their own emotions, so if you kind of be like, hey, I feel this way, they may get offended. It's just kind of having to, like, explain to them, like, hey, like, this is what I'm trying to do, like, acknowledge your feelings and make sure you're feeling heard. But I think once we can get people on board and kind of be honest with themselves and acknowledge their own feelings and their emotions, then we can kind of move to a better place, to where we're all like, this is how we're feeling. Okay, I understand what you're saying. And then also kind of like move on and become more empathetic towards other people.
Great. Thank you, Savannah. Shayla?
I think it all begins with me. Just like peace begins with you, empathy begins with you. And if I'm able to practice that in my day-to-day interactions with people. And as a role model, if I can affect them and connect with them in some way, then they will reach out to me and want to learn more and maybe practice it more. So I know that I cannot change people. They would want to change on their own. And so all I can do is be the role model and focus on my own self-growth. And this has totally met those needs of mine.
Great, thank you. All right, Joni.
Yeah, I agree with what Shiloh just said. I think I have a lot of stuff that I want to work on for myself. And I think through my my personal interactions with others and improving how I reflect to them, how I pick up how they're feeling, that'll spread.
Good, thanks, Joni. B?
So I very much resonate with what Shiloh was saying about how like it starts with you. Like I can't control what other people do, but by practicing empathy myself, I can sort of like show it to others, I guess. And like other people can pick up on your example of your behavior and that sort of thing.
Great, thank you, B. Wayne.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's interesting coming after other people have spoken because you sort of weave things together. And one of the things I'm thinking about is the metaphor of the is I think there needs to be many fingers to how empathy circles grow internationally. And I think one of those fingers is it's about us and what we do personally. But I think what you're doing in the education sector, Bill, is important because from just what I've seen of working with teachers and students, this is something that's going to capture the imagination of the education sector. But as you know, with the education sector, it's going to take it's not going to take isolated. It's going to take the policy area of education to realize its value. The other thing is that the business sector is, I think, the business and media sector, I think, is somewhere in the boardroom, those sorts of places in business growth. And in some ways, because this is offered free, I worry that it won't be taken as seriously as it could be if it was sold to the business sector as a product. I think this is something for you to think about, I think, Edwin, is that whether there should be a corporate product, not because it should be sold, because I think fundamentally it's something that we should all have anyway, but I just worried about the big business sector not wanting to have something they don't have to pay for because they don't value it. I could go on. I'll stop.
Thanks. Really interesting, Wayne. Certainly I'm thinking. Monica.
So I've thought about just like overall applying like an empathy circle within my household, but also extending it to a classroom once I do become an educator. I feel that that empathy circles are deeply necessary in schools.
Thank you. I'll go to the trainers a bit. Susan.
I'm sorry, I was just reading my note. That's fine. I pick up right here. I acknowledge that over my lifetime, I have set up a criteria for anybody in my inner circle must be deeply empathic and interested in exploring themselves and others. And it just feels like this is helping us all do that. And I would like very much to, or I really appreciate hearing how we are all doing that and creating deeper friendships through this.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Kelly?
Yeah, one thing that is coming to mind is kind of like that self-development thing that some people have already mentioned. And for me, I don't know, part of me doesn't feel, I get the idea that like, that we need to choose who we have in our life, right? And if some people aren't ready to be open, then it might be difficult for us to get our needs met in those kind of relationships. But part of me also wants to find a way to have space to just communicate with anyone in wherever they're at and however they need to be communicated with. And that still feels like it's kind of a distant thing. That empathy circles can kind of set you towards those skills. Or like you can bring someone into an empathy circle and close the gap a little bit. The other thing, just as far as more practically, I've already noticed, I mean, I did a cohort before this one, and I've been doing empathy circles as much as I can with like friends online and stuff. And it's kind of like what Dominic said, like, if you do an empathy circle with, 10 people or 15 people, a few different circles, there'll be like 2 or 3 where it just like is like a turning point, like it just awakens something in them, and they're just like, and you're just giving them this gift of like encountering something that then they are now on this new journey. And like one person that I brought into an empathy circle actually is signed up for a cohort now to become a facilitator, just because he was just so, and like another person that I had in a circle, both of these people have only done one circle. This other one, he's like talking to his family about it. And like, so I just think a lot of it is just like spreading the gift of it and just letting, some people are like, oh, like, I don't get it. It doesn't work for me, whatever. But some people are just like, you're just giving them this whole new thing. And so I think that's how it's, in my world at least, spreading to this kind of culture of empathy concept.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Timothy.
Woo, this is rich stuff. What I'm, just after today's bit of work with my small group, I'm inspired to get a little more assertive with what I'd like to see in my communication with people around me, and actually request empathy. Like after I share, make the request. Hey, I'd actually love to hear that back from what I've said. I want to make sure you really understood it. Or, hey, I'd actually really like to hear how you really are in this moment. How are you really? Just practice that question and then give a little empathy. So just in my daily life, I can see myself being more assertive, not aggressive and not passive, but just assertive, requesting and inviting empathy on purpose. And if people aren't ready, that's fine. But I have the power to create this around me a little bit more, and I can do that in small, mini 1 minute, 2 minute sessions at work with my neighbors, some sacred time with my partner. Like definitely. So I'm just inspired. Thanks.
Thank you, Timothy. Edwin.
Yeah, so what I think Bill is getting towards here is like, how do we create a more empathic culture? I mean, global culture, which at the core is how do we raise empathy to be more of a primary social value? And I really like what Timothy says about being assertive. I think there's a need for not sort of a wimpy empathy. Oh, would you please be empathic? It's a bit more assertive and for me, that means to go to the politician. So I've invited my congressman, Mark DeSaulnier, who's here in Contra Costa. He's agreed to take part in an empathy circle. He's Democrat with Republicans, so I'm trying to set that up. We have our empathy tent, which we go out to the streets and Bill and Timothy have been there. We've been in the middle of these conflicts between the political left and right. We say, we're here to listen to both of you, and we're going to help facilitate dialogues between both of you. And there's actually a documentary, Trump Phobia, What Both Sides Fear, you know, where they sort of featured what we're doing. If you get a chance to see that, it's out there on different platforms, Prime, etc. So those are it. So it's I think it was I saw a quote by Gloria Steinem. She said, "The means are the end." It's like the means we use is the ends we get. So if we use, you know, violent, domineering sort of means to do sort of political change, that's the kind of a society you get. But if you use empathic means, that's sort of the society you get. So I'm looking at taking our empathy tent, setting it up in front of the White House and, you know, and the Congress, and saying, hey, let's have empathy circles between the different sides. And one of the beauties of the empathy circle is if you observe it, if you see it, you learn it by observation. So if we have, you know, if we had had Biden and Trump instead of doing, you know, a debate, if they would have had an empathy circle with each other, I mean, that in one fell swoop, we would have had, you know, a couple 100 million people seeing that. And I think it could have had real cultural change. So there's, I appreciate that this, you know, personal growth part of it, I think is a big piece of it, but also to think kind of strategically at a larger cultural level to kind of really shift the culture. And I think it's, if we get Oprah to do an empathy circle, for example, and, you know, some actors or what have you, you know, some prominent people or politicians or Biden and Putin or something like that. So just kind of thinking in those terms. But at the very core, I think is what we're doing right here is just listening to each other, having some structure for how to do that, listening. And it's really core to everything, it seems to me. Yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on what Edwin just said. I know of some research. I can't give you the journal article, but there was some listening training between women who Israelis and Palestinians, and another group where they were pro-life and pro-choice, and very strongly disagreeing with one another, but they learned to listen to one another. And the ultimate findings were that they fell in love with one another and they didn't necessarily change their own attitudes. But if they moved from judging and stereotyping the people on the other polarity of these issues and respected and understood and loved them, that goes a long way. We don't have to change people's point of view. We need to connect with them and have them feel understood and appreciated, and hopefully they will understand and appreciate us. I think that's profound research.
Thank you, Susan and Edwin. And I will just add that, and I said that, shared this in my breakout, over my long time of being a special education teacher, I dealt with kids who were really in danger of going to a hospital or coming back from a hospital or being removed from their home. And frequently the reason of that was physical violence. And so one of the things when a kid acted out, it just seems like, you know, they threw a book or they threw a chair, comes out of nowhere, and it seems to like, what's that about? And so we would group up afterwards and we would debrief. And the question we would ask is, what's the communicative intent of that action? That rather than just assuming, oh, you lost control and that's it. We are constantly trying to be heard. And I challenge you to like look at violence and, you know, protests or whatever it is. And, you know, I think they can all fit under the rubric of we want to be heard. And when we could identify the reason why they had acted out or why they were upset and could address that, the violence went down. And that's my hope for culture of empathy, that we, you kind of eliminate the middleman of the violence and the struggle and get right to the listening and get people to be heard. So that's my 2 cents. So I'm going to turn it over to Timothy for our closing. And I just want to express my appreciation for all of your sharing and all your participation. Thanks. Timothy?
You're muted.
Well, we're on the verge of finishing this 5 weeks together. And so I just want to extend my profound, heartfelt thanks for your companionship on this journey. And not just with me, but with each other in sharing our mutual learnings and insights, and we're just basically practicing together. So thanks for growing with me. Thank you so much. Just to finish, that's my final thought. I mean, I definitely want to hear from other trainers and trainees, any final words from you, Kelly, Susan, Edwin, Bill,
I have a bit more of a sort of a next step. We had planned initially that the next cohort would start right after this cohort, but we still need about 8 or 9 more participants. So the idea was to give that instead of starting in the next cohort next week already, we'll have 3 weeks of empathy circles. They're open empathy circles, sort of a drop-in in our group. A couple in our breakout room, a couple of people mentioned having empathy circles with their friends, and they were even interested in taking the training. So you can actually invite them to the Empathy Cafe. Say, hey, come, check this out, try it out. And you can have a chance to actually facilitate. If we have breakout rooms, you can facilitate a circle there, invite friends. We'll come up with some topics. I'm not quite sure. We were discussing what topics might be. And we're not quite sure yet, but so it's 3 sessions, next 3 Saturdays, open cafe, drop in. If you're needing a little bit of a break, that's fine. If you want to, practice, that's great. Bring your friends. And then we'll start with the next cohort, which would be the 8th, May 8th. And so some of you have signed up for the next cohort. So I hope the scheduling, doesn't throw you off too much. You can, join us, and I'll send out an email to everyone about the, the scheduling to make sure you can, if you had signed up for the next cohort, that still works for you. So maybe we just do a little temperature check here. Who thinks you would like to take the training again in May the 8th? See, 1, 2, 3, great. Okay, great. Oh, fantastic. So yeah, so that was it. Just next steps, and really enjoying everyone's participation and the growth that we have together. And yeah, thanks.
Well, I want to acknowledge all the work Edwin puts in on this to facilitate and organize and invite. Let's have some hands, jazz hands for Edwin. Come on, Edwin. And did you hear his strong invitation? Come back, but also bring to, a few people that are open that might want to learn this with you in your communities.
And get ready for the empathy tent in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
When we set that up, we're going to need people to occupy Lafayette Square there. So yeah.
Nice. You mean Empathy Square? Empathy Square.
We're going to rename it. Yeah, Lafayette.
That's right.
Square.
And once again, to reiterate, for the next 3 Saturdays, April 17th, 24th, and May 1st, same time, Empathy Circle open, and the topics will be coming. So thank you, Edwin. Cool. Any other final thoughts, Susan, Kelly, Bill? None?
I just love that Shyla continues to talk about self-empathy, and it's such the secret sauce of all of this, isn't it?
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, good. I saw Bill just throw up a heart right there, like, hey, beyond words, just so much gratitude and love there, Bill. I feel that from you. Kelly, any final thoughts at all?
Peace and love.
Hey, right on. We're living it. We are living a dream here. I'm seeing some thanks in the chat. I also want to invite you to fill out the course feedback form. Remember, just a place to write down if you have any other suggestions. Edwin, I think, was going to post that
Yeah, I
And
just
here we go.
posted it, and it's more the broad overview feedback. So any kind of, it's a good place for any criticisms or, suggestions for next steps, something like that. It's a different form than the one you've been filling out. It has some different
Yes.
questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we want to grow this training. Also, I would invite each of you to send a little private chat or make sure to connect to each other and continue empathy buddy calls. Take 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. If there's somebody you connected to in this room right now that you're looking at, send a little private chat to them or look them up and send them an email. Our emails are all on the list. Just to continue those relationships, those connections. Like, we need each other to build this culture. So please, I invite you to reach out that way. So we're just about to finish up. And I guess the last thing we want to request is this. In the chat, please post one feeling, sensation or feeling that you are experiencing as a result of being here today. Go ahead, put that in right now, and then we're going to read them because I just want to savor this, right? Okay, so what I'm seeing is gratitude, feeling full and bubbly. Very nice. Inspired. 2 people feel inspired. 2 different people feel grateful, more gratitude, relaxed, actually, hopeful, accomplished. Love that feeling. Heard and understood. I'm just taking a breath to savor that. That's happening here. Yeah, join me. A lot of appreciation for each other. Breathe it in. We're living the culture of empathy right this moment. And we know what it feels like because we're human mammals. We know that, despite our culture. Okay, so just as we're finishing up, invite us all to do one last jazz hand. Wayne, we don't want to miss you with the jazz hands. Ready, set, go. Did it, yeah. Come on now.
Come
Okay,
on
great.
now.
That's it, everybody. We're done with this session. I'll maybe see you next week for the circles. May 8th for the next cohort. Let's fill it up with hundreds of people and go from there. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Next time. And